Now, world leaders from NATO's 32 member countries are in Washington today for a summit to mark 75 years since the transatlantic alliance was formed in response to the threat posed by the Soviet Union after the Second World War. President Zelensky is also in attendance. The NATO meeting has been vastly reshaped by Ukraine and the threat posed by Russia. So support for Ukraine is a major priority at the meeting. Ukraine was already on top of the agenda, but yesterday's missile attacks would have shocked the leaders. But correspondents say it's not clear how far they can go in their support. They say Ukraine's immediate hopes for membership of the organization seem likely to be dashed again. For more of these stories, I'm joined now on the line from London by Arise European Affairs analyst Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. What should we expect from this NATO summit in Washington?
Well, there are 3 points to bear in mind. First of all, President Biden is now absolutely on a testing ground, and this summit will show whether he can carry on through the elections or not. If he fails, the calls for him to step down will intensify. If he succeeds, he should make it all the way through November. Secondly, the point about the Russian attack was, of course, quite deliberately done one day before NATO. And in a way, it actually has shown up that what NATO can and cannot do is that it's fairly impotent in this respect. It is simply one more attack. However great an atrocity it is, that is what is probably going to emerge out of this summit, and that therefore NATO probably, in that sense, is slightly weakened by such an attack because it should make a strong response. But the question is, can it? Which incidentally is another problem for President Biden, irrespective of his performance, is quite what America can do about this sort of atrocity. Because if he does nothing, it shows him up, of course, to be, to some respect, weak. The third aspect, very important about the NATO conference, is that Ukraine is there. In a sense, whether it is a member or not is not all that important, despite what was said before. What is important is Ukraine is there, and in that respect, it means that Ukraine is being supported by NATO, and that is, of course, a very strong signal in its own right.
Well, let me pick you up on the first thing you talked about, which is an issue that's on the boil at the moment, which I imagine is a concern for NATO if Donald Trump regains the presidency of the United States. I mean, do you think there is worry within NATO that an ailing Joe Biden is ushering in a second Trump presidency?
Quite right, but it's actually worse than that. First of all, the point you just made is accurate, but there's a second one. Is President Biden fit to carry on leading America against Russia, because that's in effect what we're discussing here, leading NATO against the Russian attack? Is he the right man anymore? And there's, if you like, not only Trump anxiety, but Biden anxiety as well. And the problem, therefore, is America, if Biden does not put in 100% performance, if in some respect he either falters or shows himself and NATO to be not able to respond enough to Russia, then what we have ahead of us is a weakened NATO, which Russia will take full advantage of. So therefore, on several counts, even if Trump is a few months away, the effects of his possibly becoming a president and of Biden possibly not being able to keep up as it is are already having an effect.
Well, just picking up on what you were saying there about the potential for undermining NATO's deterrence, which of course that deterrence aimed at Russia, do you think they'd rather see an ailing Joe Biden in power or a vigorous Donald Trump?
To be quite honest, it's very hard to make a choice in this matter. The central problem is Donald Trump has made it quite clear he is unwilling to carry on the war. There will be concessions made of some sort. and he is as the key member of the NATO alliance, that will be that. But a faltering President Biden is no better, because if he's incapable of leading the alliance properly, then it's really, in many respects, is just as bad. Either way, for President Putin, it's a win-win situation at present.
Dr. Laskiewicz, thank you very much indeed. This was always going to be a rather brief interview because this is an abridged version of Arise News Hour. And Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is Arise European Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line there from London.